So I wanted to talk about a couple of things this morning. One is they're both. One is more of a practice, and the other is something you can look out for within the practice. So I wanted to mention talking meditation. As far as I know, Sayadaw U Tejaniya in Burma is the only person I've heard talking about talking meditation. So what does he mean? What is it? So we're already aware of our speech. I think in Triratna we're very good around the ethical content of our speech. With the precepts, the tone of our speech, whether it's sharp, whether it's kindly. So all that is included, if you like, within being aware, bringing awareness to our speech. But we're talking here about, as well as just taking awareness through talking and listening. Awareness that we're talking, awareness that we are listening. So that might include things, say, with talking, being aware of the feel of the sensations of the mouth as it's moving. Maybe there's some vibration. There's a feeling of moisture. I can feel, as I'm talking now, sensations at the back of my throat. So all that is available. We can feel, we can know whether we're smiling or whether our face is more or less mobile. And there's also the awareness of listening to another in conversation, but also the awareness of hearing ourselves as we speak, as it happens. So a present moment knowing of this aspect of our experience. And we want it to be quite light, quite open. We're not really focusing down, because talking is just one of the things that is happening within experience from moment to moment. We're really not trying hard, but keeping the awareness quite a light noticing of what's happening. And just knowing when awareness is present in those moments. And then perhaps you might recognize later, wasn't aware when during that conversation or whenever it was. So I think we can, this builds on seeing in a funny sort of way that we were looking at last week, if you were here last week. So what I find is that when I'm aware of talking or listening, then I'm automatically a little bit more aware of seeing, particularly aware of the other person who may be in front of me, but I'm actually seeing them on automatic pilot, not really aware of them. So in conversation is the obvious time we can be aware of talking and listening. I think it's especially helpful when the topic is about the Dharma, or maybe even about mindfulness or awareness or wisdom. And then if we're talking about those sorts of things, it really triggers mindfulness. And the other time I think is practicing listening is when we're listening to Dharma talks. That can be a really helpful way of just reminding ourselves to stay present as what's happening as hearing is happening, but also listening to the content. So there's the broad open hearing, and then there's this knowing what the content of what's being said. And I think it can be helpful not to necessarily attempt to do this for long periods of time initially. So maybe just say, okay, in the first few minutes of this conversation or listening to this talk, I'm just going to touch in with being aware when I can. and let that have its own effect and have its own momentum. And if the energy and enthusiasm is there and the openness of practice is there, then of course carry on. So the value, once again, is about continuity of awareness, not having big gaps where we're completely lost because we're so involved in our what we're saying and what's being said to us. There can be more awareness of the content, if you like, and so that Kalyana mind, the beautiful mind that mindfulness and wisdom sort of cultivates. You can be aware, maybe the mind just feels a bit more light, more open, more it makes can make conversations and talking more rich, more enjoyable, with that added dimension of awareness. But the final thing to notice is that we can notice the intention to speak. Intention or the impulse to action is something that's happening all the time in experience. It's quite a subtle thing, but we can notice at times when it's more predominant. So the intention to speak is not a thought. It's more like an impulse or an urge in the body, in the mind, to action. And actually, I think speech is quite a good way of noticing it, because we all know that, that feeling of wanting to say something, and perhaps we can't because we don't want to be rude and interrupt the other person. So actually, the impulse to speak is a really easy one to start off noticing. And it's can be really helpful to start seeing intentions, impulses before other types of action of body, speech, and mind, particularly body, actually. So there'll be an impulse, say, before we move the body in some way, maybe reaching for a door after you finish, standing up after you've finished meditating. There'll be impulses preceding those actions. A sort of deciding moment. I think that's what Joseph Goldstein talks about, a deciding and about to moment, where some sort of decision has been made. But in Buddhist practice, what we're interested in is what or who is making that decision. The Buddha would say it's not a who, so it's a what. It's a process where deciding happens. That impulse, that intention or urge is a way that we can recognize that deciding process happening in a more impersonal sort of way. So I'm not going to say more about that, but just we will explore it a little bit in the meditation. Yeah, I'll lead us in a way into the practice first before bringing it in. As I say, it's quite a subtle intention. Okay, so if you'd like to set yourself up to sit, I'll stop the recording.